Welcome to part 2 of the custom quest journal video. So in the previous video, I showed you how the quest mechanics work and how we can then use that system to take the data that's stored in the quest codex and the player quests array and make a custom journal. So as you gain quests, they appear in your journal, and as you click each one, you can see the text for what the quest's called and what the description of it is on the right-hand side, and you can then abandon the active quest if you don't want to do it anymore. In this video, I'm going to show you how to expand upon that, and we're going to create our own quest codex. So we're going to go beyond what the one that's built in is, and we're going to use that custom codex to add some additional functionality to our quest system. Okay, we're going to make use of this widget, which I showed you in the previous video, but we never used. What's this quest HUD for? Okay, so it's got two blank text labels in it, which will get used as we go through. So the first thing I need to show you is that if we go to the project folder outside RPG in a Box, here we are in the quest log folder. I have a data folder here. We'll go in there, and I've created a Quests.JSON. Okay, so just to be upfront, this video is going to be using JSONs. So once again, if you're very unfamiliar with coding and JSONs, this might be a bit too beyond you just yet. But feel free to stay watching if you're interested. But if you're at a stage where you're comfortable with JSONs and data and manipulation and things like that, then hopefully this video will be interesting to you. So let's take a look inside this JSON file so you can see what I've done. So this JSON file is an array that contains 4 codexes, and I've basically rebuilt a codex for each of the 4 quests that we have in the quests editor. So I've got an ID, so we've got the quest 001, we've got the name of it, the new house or the new home or whatever, the description, which is then the text as you see in the quest editor's description box. But what I've now added is task 1, task 2, task 3. This allows us to put objectives into our quest. So the first objective when you take this quest is to search the surrounding area for the door key. Once you've then found the key, the next task will be gain entry to your new home. The next task, the last task of the mission, is then clean up the mess in the house. Once you've done that, we can then complete the quest. Okay. We then have a current task property or key. The value is the task that you start on or that you're on when you are looking at this codex. Okay. So when you are given a quest at the start, you should always start on task 1, right? Because that's your first objective. So the current task always starts at task 1 of all of these codexes, okay? But as we progress in this quest, we will be updating this particular field in this code, in this JSON. So when we're on task 2 of this quest, this will say task 2. So we can check this in our code to see where are we progress-wise in each quest. So even if we start playing this quest and do 2 of its objectives, but then decide, actually, I'm bored of that quest, I don't want to fail it, but I just want to do a different one, and I do 3 of the objectives of this one, when we go back to this one, we're still where we were, progress-wise. So each individual quest has its own tracking. So that's what this current task is going to do. It's going to allow us to store what task is going to have the key that we look up for the objective for where are we currently, okay? And then I don't really use it, but I've just thrown it in anyway. But we can also put tags into our custom codex, and it's an array, and which is dictated by the square brackets. And then inside, I've just put a couple of tags. So this, for example, could be the main story. And as it's, the player's house, maybe it's under the tag personal as well. You could have other missions that are personal to the player that's got although they're part of the main story, they're not really the main quest, as it were. This could be a main story. It's not personal. It's about freeing a town. So la da da da. This could be a side quest because it's just, you know, an optional thing about killing some goblins. And maybe this hunt for this stolen artifact is also a side quest, you know, just to give you an idea of tags you could give quests that allow you to organize them or filter them, whatever. Okay. So we have this Quests.JSON file, which, as I say, is an array containing 4 codexes, because that's how many quests we have. And I've given them custom fields, the tasks, which are the objectives, as well as the current task to store which one are you currently on as you play the game. Okay. So that's inside the data folder inside the main quest log project. So if you want to follow along, then in your main project, make a data folder, all lowercase, make a quests.json file and format it like this, where it's an array with your 4 quests as codexes inside with this relevant data. Again, feel free to download the project. You'll have access to this JSON file in the data folder. Okay. So let's go back to our project. So however, we're not going to use that JSON file in our script. Okay. We've made the JSON file outside of RPG in a Box, but because we want to manipulate the data, we don't just want to read the data in, because the thing you need to understand about JSON files that are inside a data folder inside your project folder is this is read-only. We can only read this in, we can't change it, which in our case, because we want to be able to change that current task property, that's not going to work for us. We need to convert this data into a file that we can actually make changes to. So what we're going to do straight away in our startup script is, let's click Edit. We're going to, let me just grab my notes. We're going to create a variable, which I'm just going to call, because we don't need to reuse it, we're only going to write it once, but I'm calling it that to explain what it is. We're going to build a writable JSON. Okay, what is it going to equal? Well, we're going to bring in that JSON that's in the data folder in our project, the one I was just showing you. So bring that whole JSON file in and store it inside build write JSON. So this variable now contains that JSON file. Okay. Now what we're going to do is use the save data command to save a writable version of it. So we're just basically making a copy. Okay. Save data. And what data do we want to save? Well, we want to save that local variable we just made. And we're going to call this quests.json. What this will do is this will make a copy of this file. It's going to be called the exact same thing, but it's going to store it in the same folder on your computer where your save games are stored. And that will be C users, your username, app data, roaming, and then the name of the project. In this case, it would be quest log for me. Okay. In there would be your save games if you have any. And in this case, it's where it's going to save this particular copy of this JSON. So you'll have a JSON file that's in your data folder in your project. But now, when you first start the game, it will make a copy of that file as well inside your save games folder. And then from now on, we're not going to be using this. This is just at the beginning of our game, so we can grab that data and make a writable copy of it. But from now on, when we query this JSON, we're actually going to be loading the data from our save folder. So it's always up to date with what we've changed, rather than referring to old data, if that makes any sense. Obviously, it goes without saying that you could just build the JSON file in your code and then just save the data. But I didn't want to do that, because then that just adds processing power and all of that, because you have to sort of build these multiple codexes inside an array. If you just make the JSON file outside of RPG in a Box first, then just load it in and then save it out, it will then make a copy of it that's writable. Okay, so that's how you make a copy of something that's writable. So let me just note that. This will convert a read-only JSON to one you can now edit. Okay, but you just have to understand, and you'll see this as we go through, that you will no longer be able to use the data quests.json. Now we'll be referring to this one from now on, because we want to change it, and therefore we also want to, when we refer to it, make sure we're referring to one that has changes in it. So this is the only time where we're going to be using data quests.json, because we load it in at the start, but then convert it into one that we can edit and reference that one. Okay, so we apply and save. So that just means at the start of the game, it will build us the writable version of this JSON we made earlier. So where do I then use that code? I think I use it in quest click. So next, what we want to do is go to our quest click script. So again, make sure you've already watched the previous video, so you are expanding upon what we've done previously. So this is the script where when you click each of these buttons here, when you click each of these buttons, it updates the text on the right and it ticks these boxes, etc. We're going to now expand this functionality. Okay, so where are we in the text? Right, so just under here where we're setting the widget text, we want to add an additional bit of code. So what we want to do is make a local variable called myQuestCodex, because it's mine, it's my custom one, and it's going to equal, and instead of data, because again that would be the read-only version, which would be out of date if we've made changes, we want to load data, which is going to bring in the one that we can write. Okay, and we want to load data quests.json. Okay, so that will store the entire JSON inside myQuestCodex. Okay, then we want to for loop through that JSON file, but in this case it's the local variable. Okay, so for everything in myQuestCodex, store it in a local variable, in this case $Q. Am I using, yeah, I'm already using $Q up here, so I'm not going to do that in case it conflicts. So let's just call this for entry, for every entry in myQuestCodex. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to reference the quest HUD, which we haven't used before. And I forgot to do the IDs of the elements, so it's still just 001, 002, etc. But this is the big text, the invisible text that's at the top of that widget. We want the text for that to equal, where are we? $current quest name. So that's a copy of the text as it appears in the journal anyway. Then we want to do a check for if $entry, and specifically the ID key, because remember this is a codex, so if the ID key in this codex is equal to, can I paste? Yeah, widget quest journal, element QID, so that needs to change. And then button ID, because we're already using that here. So this is just going to be the number, like so. And we want to get the text. Then get rid of that semicolon, add an end. So if the ID, as we loop through the codex, is the same as the one that's on the journal in the quest ID hidden field, then $task is a local variable we're going to create. It's going to equal $entry, and it's going to grab, where are we? current task. So it's going to look up what's the current task we're on. Okay. And then widget quest HUD dot elements 0002, which is the label underneath it. That text will equal $entry $task. Okay, so that will dynamically grab the task that we're on. What's the current task of this quest? Show that text underneath on that widget. And then we want to break out of the loop so that we're not doing that constantly. Once it's done it once, stop for looping through, because if it's found the one we're on, then don't need to do any more. If, however, it's not the ID for that, then widget quest HUD is that quest HUD element 00002 dot text equals nothing. Okay, and then at the very end of everything, show widget quest HUD. Okay, so let's just go into game and see what that's doing for us. So we know it works without, so we won't bother with that. So I'll click once, then open the quest. There we go. So we get the widget at the top now that shows us what our active quest is. So it actually shows, and that will stay on screen even if we close the journal. Obviously, again, you can customize this. This is just to give you an idea, but this just allows us to see, what quest are we currently doing and where are we in this quest. Currently, our objective is to search the surrounding area for the door key. So I know what my current immediate task is. So even though if we look in the journal, we have the overall story of this quest, I've been given a home to settle in, I need to find a way in or whatever. Let's give ourselves a different quest for a moment. So here we have free the town, for example. Here we go. So the description is there's a dark force overshadowing a nearby town. I must defeat it and free the town. So that's like the overall story. But what's our most immediate objective? Speak with the bartender. Okay, now I know what I've got to do to progress this quest, right? So these are the sort of objectives that just tell the player minutely how to progress through and complete that quest, okay? And you can see that as I click through, it's updating the title and the objective. So this is the relevant objective for this quest. This is the relevant objective for this quest, okay? Now, we need a way now to progress, because it's all well and good showing what our objective is, but now we need a way to complete objectives. We don't have that functionality yet. So for this, we're going to make this a custom function so that just like with complete quest, we can make our own complete function. Okay. So for this, we're going to make a function, which I'm going to call complete task. And this is going to take two properties, two parameters, the quest ID and the task. Okay. Begin, end. So now let me find my notes for this function. Okay, so this is the last bit of code that we need to do today, really. So first of all, we need to store my codex. So again, we need to load data because we need to use the writable version, not the one that's in our data folder. So bring in the data that we've saved. We obviously haven't done any saving data yet, but we're about to, okay? So first of all, we need iterator variable. This will be very important. We'll come back to that in a moment. But now what we want to do is for loop through. So we'll use $Q again because it's available in my codex. we're going to for loop through this codex. And if $q ID is equal to $quest ID. So in other words, you're going to pass in, when you run this task, you're going to pass in a quest ID, because when you complete a task, it's not just enough to say what task you want to complete. You want to say it's task 2 of this quest, right? So we're going to check if the ID, as it is in the codex, matches the one you've passed in when you call the function. If it is the relevant one, then we want the task that you've typed. So if you type, I want to complete task 1, first of all, we increment it to 2, because then we basically go on to task 2, right? Then $current task, we're going to create another variable, and that's going to equal task, and then pass in $task, the one we just, so this will basically be task 2. If we're on task 1, and you say, I want to complete Quest 001's task 1, then this will become 2, and then this will become task 2, okay? So by doing that, that then allows us to check if $q current task, oh no, sorry, I'm missing a step. That's what you type. So if $q and then passing in this thing we've just built is not null, so in other words, at some point you'll run out of tasks, right? If you've got a quest that only has 3 objectives and now you're on task 4, we want to make sure it doesn't error because there isn't a task 4. So we just check first of all that the task number you're now on, does it bring back a task? So is it not null? If it's not null, then then the current task field that we're on should now become current task. So it updates what the current task is. Okay, so if this is now task 2 and there is actually data for task 2 in the codex, then it will update the current task field to say task 2. So it will update what task you're now on, okay? Then, one more check. If global.property active quest, this is where that property comes in, is equal to the quest ID you've passed in for the function, then we want to update the widget. We only want to update the widget if it's the active quest. And I'll explain a bit more about that when we test it again. But it's going to equal $q $current task. Okay. Oops. Now this is the important bit. Okay. $q is a copy of the data that's inside my codex. We need to update my codex. We need to actually update the codex itself, because if we try and save the codex now, even though we've made changes to $q is a copy of the data. Okay. Now we need now to update the codex so it saves the changes. So what we need to do is write all of this stuff back into my codex, this variable here. So for that, what we need to do, and this is why the iterator is used, we need to write $mycodex, undo, $mycodex, open and close square brackets, pass in the iterator. So that's going to be, let me just finish writing it. Okay, so that's the code. Okay, so what this is, because my codex, the JSON file is an array with codexes inside it, right? So it's laid out like this. JSON file, which then leads to an array, and that array contains 4 codexes, right? That's how the JSON file is laid out. So my codex is the JSON. Iterator is referring to the array number, therefore returning the relevant codex, okay? So we need to know which index of the array is this codex we're updating. That's where the iterator comes in. So if it's the first codex we're changing, then this will be 0. So we're going to say codex 0, update that to be the codex we've just changed. Okay, the whole of Q, right? Otherwise, if it's the next quest, then this will be iterated up to 1. So this will be my codex 1. Fill that in. Okay. So obviously the most important bit is after, before we end the for loop, just checking something. Yeah, that must be right. So before we end the for loop, which is here, we then increment the iterator. Okay, so each time it loops through at the end, it increments. Okay, and then just before you end the function, we then save data, and we're going to save my codex back to Quests.JSON. Okay, this is very important because obviously this is what's going to make it so that our JSON files will track each quest independently. Okay, so as we update what the current task is, we need to write that back into the codex, and then we save that codex back into the Quests.JSON so that the Quests.JSON has stored the current task that we're on per quest. Okay, validate that, and this is our new complete task function. So we can now call that at any point in our game where we want to complete an objective. So I have a practical example set up ready for us. So here I have the house, and the first objective of this mission quest is to find the key. So if we look behind the house, I've put a key object already. I've put a script on it. The script currently removes entity self, so it hides the key, plays a sound, you've picked up the key, but now we can pass in our new function. We also want to complete task. It's quest 0001. That's the quest. That's what the quest that has this task in. Pick up the key, and it's task 1. Okay, so we want to complete task 1 when we pick up this key. So task 1 of quest 1. Okay, so here we are in game. So let's get our first quest, the new home. Let's activate it. So it's now our active quest. Search the surrounding area for the door key. So let's do that. Let's walk around here. Oh, by the way, I should mention, I put this script on collides. So you just walk into the key. So this should now update. As soon as we walk in, it should play a sound, hide the key, and then this should update. Yeah. Now we've got our next objective, gain entry to your new home. Okay. Now, if we go grab another quest, let's click the board again, open up our journal, we could change to this one, and it updates, speak with the bartender, because that's the first task of this quest, okay? But if we go back to the new home, it shouldn't be find the key. It should still remember that we found the key, that our current objective with the previous mission is to gain entry with the key. And sure enough, when we go back to the old quest, it's still on the second objective. So it's remembered because it's written, it's changed the current task. Okay, let's just print the codex for a minute. $check equals load data quests.json, and let's print check 0. Okay, current task has been updated. It's no longer task 1 now, it's task 2. So then it looks up what's task 2, boom, and then it uses that text. So that's what our complete task actually changes what the current task is and then updates the text. But every time you click one of these buttons in the quest click script, it's checking what this is and then looking up that text here. So it's always up to date with what's written into the JSON under this property, okay, under this key, okay? So that's why it's so important to be able to write that into the JSON so we can store our progress as we go through each quest, okay? Now, if we are active on this quest, but we manually complete task quest 2, task 1, okay, it shouldn't show on here because it's not our active quest, okay? But behind the scenes, we have cheated, effectively. We've completed the first objective of this quest. So when we go to this quest now, instead of saying speak to the bartender, it should say, I'm trying to remember what the next mission is. I think it's visit the armorer. And there we go. So when we do make this the active quest, it remembers what the task was changed to. So it always shows the active task, even if you completed a quest, even if it's not active. When you then make it active, it will still remember what you've already done, so it will update on here. As well as each quest having its own complete and failure script that you can assign, you've also got events in the game configuration panel. Here in the global event scripts, you also have these 3 down at the bottom. Quest given, quest completed, quest failed. These will trigger regardless of the quest. So these ones will trigger on a specific quest. So for example, if I put a completion script on the new home quest, then, and I didn't put it on any of the others, then that script will only trigger when you complete this specific quest. However, scripts you place on this quest completed will trigger every time a quest is completed, regardless of which quest it is. Likewise with the failed, it will trigger any time a quest fails, no matter what quest it is. And we've also got an extra one here, is something that can happen when you're given a quest, no matter what the quest is. Okay. Now, another difference, between the scripts that you can place on a specific script and the scripts that you can place in the global events for quests is that these 3 events have a built-in local variable that you can use when you use scripts in these events. And that local variable is $quest_ID. So we're going to use that now, actually, because what I want to do is make a script that when you fail or complete a quest, regardless of what quest it is, it checks for something and then, if it's the case, does something. So we need that to happen every time you fail a quest or complete a quest. So it makes sense not to put it actually on these, but to put it in the completed and failed global events. Okay, so first of all, we're going to go back to our script editor. We're going to go to our abandon quest script, and we're going to edit, and we're going to take out this if statement here that says if global property active quest is equal to Q, then global property active quest is blanked out. We're not going to do that, or at least we're not going to do that here. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to let the quest fail, and then we're going to use the global failure. This will then trigger the global failure script because we will fail this quest. So it will trigger the global event quest failed. Okay. So what we want to do now is make a single script. We'll apply and save that. We're going to make a single script. So let's close and click new, called fail quest. And we can call it fail quest because it doesn't matter what the quest is. So it's going to be very generic. But what we're going to do is we're going to put that here. If global.property active quest is equal to, And then, as I say, we can use that built-in local variable that you get with the event quest failed, which is quest_ID. And that's basically a reference to what's the quest that's just failed. Okay, so we can check what was the quest that just failed. So if global property active quest is the one that's active, if we've just failed the active quest, then global.property active quest should then be blanked out, okay, because you've just failed the active quest. So there's nothing active. Obviously, if you wanted to, I'm not going to, but if you wanted to, you could script it so that it then scans your player quests array and gives you a different one, right? So you never, as long as you've got quests to do, it will fall back to another quest. I'm not going to do that in this video. I'm going to leave it to the player to then choose what they want to do as their next quest before it sort of decides for you. Now that we've got our HUD in place, there's a few things we want to do with that as well in a fail event. So we want to reference the widget. We want to reference the name element, and we want to set the text to blank. And we're going to do the same with the label underneath it. So .text equals blank, and then because it's been blanked out, we'll also hide widget quest HUD. So every time you fail a quest, it will check if it's your active quest that you've just failed. And if it is, if it matches the ID of the quest you've just failed to the one that's stored in that global property, it will empty that global property, so you no longer have an active quest because it's failed and you haven't chosen a replacement yet. Then it empties out the HUD that's on the screen permanently for what is your active quest and what's your objective, and then it hides that particular HUD as well because you don't have an active quest, therefore you don't have an objective, etc., etc. Obviously, if you had other game elements, and we'll talk about this at the end, like for example, certain NPCs that spawn or something, depending on what your active quest is. If that's no longer your active quest, then you might want to sort of throw into here as well the removing of entities and things like that. But for now, just because we're just doing a simple text display quest system, we can leave it at this, okay? But this is how you would basically check if an active quest has failed, then you can have things to do with that quest be reset or changed or whatever, okay? So we'll click apply and save on that. And then what we'll do is we'll go to the game configuration panel, global event script section, and quest failed, we will set it to fail quest. Click OK. We should probably do a completed as well. So that's what we'll do. We'll click save as. We'll call this complete quest. Click OK. And then it's literally the same thing. If global property active quest equals quest ID, in other words, if the quest you've just completed has the ID as the one that's in your active quest, then you should clear out the active quest global property. You should clear out the HUD because if you've completed the quest, there's no more objectives to do, and then hide the HUD because now you don't have an active quest. So this literally is, in fact, now I've realized it, you really didn't need to call this complete and fail quest. You could have had one script that goes on both of these events, but we'll do it this way anyway. So we'll have one that's a copy nonetheless, but this goes into quest completed. Okay, as I say, these could have just been one script because they do the same thing, and you could have named them something even more arbitrary than fail and complete quest. You could have had like end quest or something like that, and it caters for both. But nonetheless, we can click OK now. Now, obviously, it goes without saying that if you wanted a particular quest to give you XP or something when you complete it, this is not where you would put that. Yes, you could say, if quest ID equals quest 0001, but really this isn't the place to do that. The place to do that would be a script that goes into here, goes into the completion script event of the quest that you want to give that XP. So let's say, for example, we wanted to give the player 20 XP for completing the Goblin Threat, then you would create a script that gives the player 20 XP, and it would go into this event, not the global event, it would go into the scripts. It would go into the quests specific completion script. So when you complete this script and quest, and only this quest, does it then trigger the script for the XP. Okay. It should be pointed out that you can have 2 scripts at a time. So in other words, if you put a script in the completion script for the quest, but you also have a script in the global completed field, these will both trigger. Okay. So in other words, if you have a script that's on the quest itself and you have a script on the global quest completed, both completed scripts will trigger. So this one will trigger and this one will trigger. Okay. And they practically trigger at the same time, although in my tests, a nanosecond or a hair first is this one. So this one will trigger just a fraction of a second before the one in here. But to all intents and purposes, they trigger at the same time. They're going to literally happen at the same time. It's too fast for anything to really be noticeable in game. But if you wanted to know which one printed first, this one printed before this one printed in a test. Okay, so they do trigger at the same time, i.e. they do work, they do trigger together. But if you want to know the hierarchy, this one is triggered just before this one. Okay, the one in the global events. Okay, so let's just give this a test. Make sure that when we fail a quest or complete a quest, it's checking for the active quest. So here we are in game. I've already clicked the sign a couple of times. So if we go into the quest journal, we've got a couple of quests. So if I click the top one, we get our active quest displayed and the objective that we're currently on. Now, I've just realized that what we should do with the complete script is make it so that it also updates this widget if it's open. Because you'll see at the moment, if I bring the console down with this open and we complete quest 0002, it will hide, it won't show on this panel. Okay. You wouldn't know anything's changed. If I close it and reopen it, you can see it's now gone. Okay. So we should probably have made it. We're not going to, but you can see how what you would have done is in the complete quest script, you check if this widget is open, or you wouldn't even need to check it, just do it anyway. You would just clear out, you would just basically recall the refresh quest log event, basically. Let's go get ourselves another quest. So now we've got the new home and the goblin fret. So it's not really possible to fail a quest that's not active, but let's type fail quest, and you can see that the active quest at the moment is quest 1. So let's fail quest 3, and this will check if it's active. Okay, that's quest 3. Now, because it's not active, it won't hide this, because this is we won't hide this because this is this quest. This is the one that's active. It's got the tick, it's got the display. We're going to fail this one. Now, again, we should probably have put into the fail script that, again, it updates the fact that this has been failed and disappears if it's open. But we can just refresh it this way. Okay. Now, if I now fail this one by clicking the abandoned quest, let's just give ourselves one more, so that we don't get the change of widget, because it's the last quest. So now we've got quest 4. Okay, so we've got 1 and 4. Let's now activate quest 4, the stolen artifact, and let's abandon it. Because it's the active quest, it should both clear out the global property, but also clear out this widget and hide it. Okay, because it was the active quest. And then if we make this active, we get that one back. And then if we abandon this, it hides the HUD and it also now shows the different widget because that was the last quest. It should also be pointed out that if you fail or complete a quest, nothing is stopping you from re-giving it. So if I give quest quest0001 and open up my quest log, I've got the quest again. Okay. Now, I just want to quickly test something here on camera. Let me just complete task quest001 or 1. So we've completed task 1. So we're on objective 2. Now let's abandon it. Okay. And then let's give myself quest 1 again. It should still remember what stage I'm at. Yeah, gain entry to your new home. Okay. So I just wanted to make sure that should be how it works. And I just wanted to check that. Okay. So obviously, if you did give yourself the quest again with this current system, it would be on the last objective. If you completed it, for example, then when it comes back, it would still be on the last objective, and that's fine. However, you shouldn't be able really to give yourself quests that you've already completed or have already failed. You know, maybe if it's failed, you do want the player to be able to try it again, so you want it to reset. But certainly when it's completed, unless it's a repeatable quest, which you could have, you know, maybe it's a quest where, you know, you can use it to farm XP or something. But certainly if it's like a main story quest, you probably don't want the player to do that again. So you can't lock that with the built-in quest system, because the built-in quest system, player.quests, when you give player quest, when you use the give quest 001 command, right, it all it does, as I say, is it just puts that quest ID into the player.quests property. And so when it does that, you have that quest again. So what you can do is in our custom codex, where we've got things like task 1, task 2, task 3, current task, you could also have a completed or a failed with a true false Boolean value. Okay. So when you complete a quest in your complete quest script, you change the JSON so that the completed flag or key has the value true, or the failed tag has the value true. So it logs the fact that you've failed or completed a quest. And then what you would do is when you give quest with that ID, you would check the codex. Has it already been failed or completed? And if so, then remove it then automatically from the player. Okay. So that would give you a system where you can't repeat quests, because currently you can, because there's nothing inbuilt in RPG in a Box that's blocking that. So just be aware of that. You could also make it so that if global property active quest is such and such, then you can have different game objects spawn on screen. So for example, you could have an NPC. Let's just put Justin down for a moment. Let's just say he was an NPC and he's for quest 1. And then you can make it so that if quest 1 is active, i.e. if it's in the global property active quest, if that ID matches, then all of a sudden you can attach the exclamation mark. If you make an attachment of an exclamation mark, so let's say, for example, we quickly, you know, just as we're getting to the end of the video, let's just quickly make a object. Okay. Again, we'll just quickly throw this together. It doesn't have to be anything special. We'll just click dot and an F. That'll do. And then delete. Oh, delete voxel. Something like that. Okay, save that. Put an attach point on it, sorry. Save it. And then on our player model or NPC model, whatever you want to do, you can attach it to the head. So preview the head attach point, object model eMark, and then size it accordingly. So where's the attach point? Head, scale, 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, and then select the attach point, move it up. You get the idea. Hide the attach point for a minute. Yeah, the idea, yeah. So you'd have an exclamation mark that you could attach. So then in your script, you would say if global property active quest is equal to quest 001, if the NPC, or quest 2, speak with a bartender, right? If this is the bartender, then if that's the active quest and if that's the current task, then attach object to NPC bartender, exclamation mark, using attach point head, etc. And then you can make an exclamation mark appear that shows the player, oh, this is the person I've got to interact with for this quest. Yeah, so there's lots of different ways you can take the objective idea and build it out into your game with visual clues and things that help the player. Arrows maybe that are connected to the player that point the way to different waypoints or whatever. So I leave that up to you to go further with this, but as I say, link in the description for the project. So now we've finished with it. This will be what the project file is, so you can break it apart, take a look at it, see how it all works. Take a look at the JSON file, take a look at the scripts and everything. But hopefully this video has been interesting and useful to you and giving you an idea on how to use the quest system, how to make your own journals, how to make your own quest systems with objectives to go beyond what RPG in a Box offers by default. So that would bring us to the end of this video. Stay tuned for the next tutorial.